Of the many jobs that libraries do, what are they most well known for? Sharing stories, of course. Now let's consider that there are a lot of different types of libraries in the world. We interact with all sorts of libraries, everything from public, academic, and school libraries to specialized information organizations like orchestras and museums. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of UW Bibliosmiles. My name is Danielle, a host here. This show serves as a space where listeners and I can explore topics related to stories, people, and libraries. Today we'll meet Rachel, the music librarian for the Reno Philharmonic. In today's episode, Rachel and I will explore how Rimsky-Korsakov's interpretation of the story of Scheherazade transcends spoken language through the use of musical motifs and instrumental characterization, common in classical music. If you're not sure what that means, don't worry. We'll explain it before the end of the show.
Hi, Danielle. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm so excited to share one of my favorite orchestral works with you. My orchestra, the Reno Phil, was scheduled to perform this piece in March 2020. I had done all the work to prepare the music, and folders had gone out to the orchestra members when all of a sudden the world was in lockdown and our performance was canceled. We finally rescheduled this performance to this September, and it felt so amazing to finally bring Scheherazade to life after a 2-year delay. Because of this, Scheherazade is a piece that is both really sentimental to me and also incredibly powerful. It showed me the impact that live orchestral performances can have in bringing together a group of people from all different backgrounds for a shared experience.
Thanks for painting a picture of your connection to this piece of music. I cannot wait to dive deeper into how this narrative overlaps with the musical rendition of this story. First, let's start with the name. According to the Wikipedia page on Scheherazade, this name derives from the Middle Persian name Scheherazade, which is composed of the words Sher, meaning lineage, and Azad, meaning noble or exalted. So we could say that her name is equivalent to the phrase noble lineage, which is pretty fitting for someone marrying a sultan, don't you think?
Definitely, I would say so.
Okay, now to contextualize the story. There are many editions and versions of this narrative, with some editions containing only a few hundred stories, and others including 1001 or more. The earliest manuscript of 1001 Nights dates back to the 14th century in Syria. Antoine Galland translated this specific text into French, and this version is rumored to have been Rimsky-Korsakov's inspiration for the musical composition that we know and love by the end of this episode.
Well, I definitely hope you and your audience will love it.
I hope so too. The character of Scheherazade gives a new meaning to the concept of bedtime stories. In the frame narrative of 1001 Nights, the Sultan marries a woman each day only to kill her in the morning. When it came time for Scheherazade to marry the Sultan, she understood the risk and combated her fate by telling him a captivating story every night, leaving the story on a cliffhanger. This tactic ensured that the Sultan kept her alive another day. Eventually, her 1001 stories over the course of 1001 nights convinced the Sultan to keep her alive because he had, yes, you guessed it, fallen in love with her. True romance.
If that's not true love, I don't know what is. Even outside of my deep love for Rimsky-Korsakov's music, I think the story of Scheherazade works on so many levels, and your summary really highlights what makes it such a good story. See, we start off with these two characters, Scheherazade and the Sultan, who are in direct conflict with each other. I'm curious, Danielle, in non-musical storytelling, how does the audience learn about a character?
Okay, so depending on how the author approaches their writing, they may represent the characters through, I would say, their actions, physical description, or internal dialogue. I do wonder how you would do this through music, though. How does a composer approach this? How do you think, Rachel?
Well, a composer can't literally describe a character through music, so they have to lead the audience to feel a certain way about that character. I brought some sound bites from the New York Philharmonic's performance of Scheherazade to help illustrate this. Here is clip number 1. And now clip number 2. Knowing that what you just heard is supposed to represent each of those 2 main characters, which do you think represents Scheherazade?
I would think it was the second one for sure, with the violin.
Exactly, which means that the first clip represented the Sultan with those low voices.
Voices? What do you mean exactly by voices? I'm not really sure what that means.
Oh, well, when we say voices in the context of an instrumental work, what we mean is the instruments that play in a certain range. So high voices would be like your flutes, violins, and oboes. Mid voices are your clarinets and violas, and low voices would be trombones, tubas, and the string basses.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Got it.
Rimsky-Korsakov uses certain voices to define his characters, Scheherazade being the high voices and the Sultan being represented by the lows. Here, Rimsky-Korsakov behaves like a storyteller, characterizing his protagonist and antagonist through leitmotifs and instrumentation.
And for those of us who aren't familiar with classical music, instrumentation and leitmotifs are what exactly?
Oh, right, sorry. Instrumentation is a term that describes both the use of instruments in a composition and the qualities of those instruments, voicing being just one of those qualities. A leitmotif, and that's L-E-I-T, first came from opera and ballet and is a short musical phrase that embodies a specific character. A great pop culture example of a leitmotif is actually Darth Vader's theme in Star Wars. You hear it and immediately think of that character.
Okay. That's cool. That term makes a lot more sense, and thank you for explaining.
Of course. These 2 clips are very clear examples of how instrumentation and motifs work together. The leitmotif used for the Sultan is very heavy and dark. It's written in a minor key, which generally makes the listener feel sad or ill at ease. And while this line can be played by a violin, it wouldn't have the same menacing impact as it has when played by the lower end of the orchestra. The same tools are used to characterize Scheherazade. It's a very innocent motif that Rimsky-Korsakov has created, and as opposed to the shouting quality that we get from the Sultan, it has a more conversational tone, much like a human voice speaking softly.
I totally can hear that. And I know what you mean. I did listen to this piece before you came on the show as a little research, and I will say that I struggled to understand how the music translated into a story with characters, but I will say I am starting to get it though. I think I'm getting there.
Good. I'm glad it's starting to make more sense. The motifs from the clips we just heard are repeated throughout the piece. So now if you listen back to the full recording, you might be able to hear the characters as they reappear. This is especially notable with the Scheherazade motif because its reoccurrence throughout the work is reminiscent of the frame narrative of the original 1001 Nights story. I have another couple of sound bites for you to illustrate this. As you're listening through the piece, you'll be in the middle of a movement that's painting a picture of a ship adrift in a stormy sea or a battle between knights, and all of a sudden you'll hear Scheherazade's motif rising above the picture that is being painted, usually voiced by the high instruments like the flute or violin, reminding you of this frame narrative once again. If you listen here, we have a clip from a battle scene. In this clip, you can hear the fight between the trumpets and trombones going back and forth with the same fanfare. And then, right as things start to ramp up in the middle of the scene, it all cuts away and we're left again with the high solo voice representing Scheherazade, this time played by the flute. We see this again and again throughout the piece, where Scheherazade and sometimes the Sultan are woven into the stories, either as the solo voice, as was the case here, or as complementary lines to the main melody.
I'm just in awe that Rimsky-Korsakov was able to weave the idea of a frame narrative into his musical piece. It not only mimics the text, but it also shows how talented he really must have been as a composer. I kind of can't believe it, honestly, I'll say.
Yeah, well, and it's really done in such a simple way from a musical point of view. He establishes Scheherazade at the beginning of with that leitmotif we heard, and then all he has to do is bring back that line over and over again to create the illusion of a frame narrative.
Yeah, I can see that.
The final aspect of Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade that I wanted to bring up today is resolution. As you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, after 1001 nights of listening to Scheherazade's stories, the Sultan finally falls in love with her. Rimsky-Korsakov achieves this in the most beautiful way by bringing the two motifs from the beginning of the piece together, but this time, instead of being in conflict, the motifs complement each other. I have one last clip to share that will hopefully show you what I mean.
That really is beautiful. And it's crazy to think that these two disparate voices could complement each other so well. That seems like a perfect end to the episode.
Much like it was a perfect end to the story of Scheherazade.
Well, thanks for explaining classical music in a way that's accessible to the everyday person. It can definitely be really intimidating for someone who's unfamiliar with it. I can definitely speak for myself. That's how I felt for sure.
Anytime, Danielle. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really did have a wonderful time.
No problem, Rachel. Thanks for coming. Upon first listen, classical music like Rimsky-Korsakov's rendition of Scheherazade can seem foreign and difficult to understand for a novice listener. But the tools we discussed today, characterization and motifs, are used in all types of stories across many different mediums. Being able to find and identify those familiar tools can open up a whole new world of new stories for those who listen. So there you have it, folks. Libraries and librarians are doing cool work at cool places, like at orchestra libraries.